anything else that they wanted to bring up with those first four policies that are going for first read? Any concerns or items that people want to address?
No, I looked them.
Okay. And then just to remind everybody that the federal grant fund policy, the COVID-19, that is the new policy that we want to waive first read on, and that's going directly to second read next week. And was there anything about that anyone wanted to bring up? I had just one question that I wanted to ask, but anybody, everyone else feel all set with that policy? I was just, is the name of it the federal grant fund policy COVID-19? You know, one of the things that I was wondering is because this is meant to be like an emergency style policy, did the title of it come from, is that the same title that all the other districts are using? I noticed our Wishwe BOCES region, this is the policy that they all have. Is that how we want to call it? Is that what it is called, or does it matter?
That's how it was moved forth to all of us. So I haven't heard anyone change the name. Okay, okay, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it isn't, it's, unfortunately, it sounds like we may need to consider it moving into next year just in case we are in this situation again. But I haven't heard much. People, they shared it out, and that's really all I heard of it.
I don't think it really matters. It was just something because I think the policy itself specifies that it's broader. But I just wanted to throw it out there. I leave it as is for now because it's pertinent to today, and we can talk about it down the line if we ever need to. Okay, so the next item on our agenda, just next steps for our policy committee. And now that we have, we're caught up with the backlog of policies, how do we want to spend our time? In addition to the updates that Erie 1 sends in, I'm wondering about what people's thoughts are. One idea that I, have been mulling over is just thinking about developing a regular schedule for review to supplement the updates that Erie 1 BOCES provides. I spent some time looking through the policy manual, and I think we have something like 200 and close to 250 policies in the manual, and with a wide variety of dates on them, but many of them were last appear to be last looked at in 2013, which is a long time ago at this point. So I have had it in my mind that maybe we should talk about like a regular review cycle, what that would look like. What do you guys have thoughts about that, or what do you think about that idea? Or is there something else? Because I don't know the extended history of the policy committee in general, and I don't really know what the policy committee looked like prior to updating the backlog of policies. And maybe some of you have other information to share.
I think setting up a regular quarterly schedule, perhaps Sarah can give a little more feedback as to that, if that would be based on her experience, the time that she's been in the office, about the frequency of the updates. But I agree with you, Marianne. I think it would be good to have, just like our other committees, they set up a quarterly or 4 times a year, or perhaps 3 times a year. I'm not sure. So it's on the books, and then when things come up, we can funnel that matter towards the existing schedule rather than scrambling. I don't know, Sarah, if you could give a little feedback as to the frequency of the updates, or.
So the updates generally come on a quarterly basis. That's what the service we have paid for. There have been times when updates have come faster simply because they're maybe mandated, or regulatory in nature. So at a minimum, quarterly.
So
I think it would be a good opportunity. Marianne, you've done a tremendous job moving us forward and getting us on course, and maybe we'll keep you here for life. Maybe that's what winds up happening. But if somebody else winds up, leading or chairing this committee, it would be nice to have that structure in place so that we stay on top of things.
right. So if we're looking at something like a quarterly review or 3 times a year review, I'm not sure exactly what, so let me back up for a second. I went through, I didn't even count them all, but there are over 100 policies that don't have any notation beyond 2013. And that's a lot of policies. And in addition to that, there are 45 policies that are mandated. There's probably more than that, because as I looked at it, some of the policies that are mandated, I think, are split into 2 or 3, but they all have it's all required by law. That said, I still think that we need to look at the ones that are mandated because of the opportunity to customize around and within those policies. So I'm thinking, like, there's over 100 policies from 2013, and some of them may require nothing and some may require some revision. It's hard for me to picture what would a quarterly review, would we take it by sections of the policy manual, or, and now this is because I'm not very creative, I'm picturing in my own mind electronic review for us to read, and things that are requiring attention we bring to our meetings the way we have in the past. It seems to make sense to me, but if there's a different model that would occur quarterly or 3 times a year, help me understand what that would look like, because I'm sure there are different models. I'm just not that creative.
So, Marianne, I think you're broadening what has historically been done in the past, because what Erie One BOCES does is they regularly check the policies for their relevance, and when they send the quarterly updates, those are the ones that they've checked during that period. I think what you're telling the policy, to correct me if I'm wrong, is that you want to set a schedule where you're looking at all of the policies and not just the ones that Erie One BOCES is recommending changing or updating.
I'm thinking that there should be some indication that every policy has had eyes on it within at least the last 5 years of it. You know what I mean? Because I think that it sounds like Erie One provides updates as they see fit, as information comes into them and they go in and look, but they would not necessarily identify some of the things that may be customized or pertinent to our school in some of the policies that aren't mandated, or some of the other customizations that have occurred. And I don't know, because I haven't looked at all the policies. There may be nothing that needs to be changed, but I just think putting eyes on it, in the absence of an update from Erie One, putting eyes on a policy that was last updated in 2013, just to say, yep, we've looked at this, here's our stamp of approval, or here's a revision we want to make.
I think that makes sense, because 7 years is a long time, and cycling them through potentially, I think what I heard you say, Marianne, is the system that we've been using to go through the recent ones that Erie One was putting before us, to look at those, and if things can be, if any revisions need to be made, then we would make those, then move them forward to the board for review. If there's ones that didn't need any revision, no change, at least we could make a notation on it that it was reviewed by the policy committee in 2020 or whatever the date is, so that we know that
Mhm.
it was looked at.
It was looked at, right.
Yeah, and left alone, but anything that needs revision, it could be revised, go through the cycle that we've been doing, first read, second read, voted on, and updated. And then anything that was trickier than that come to one of the meetings, just like what we've been doing in terms of how do we make sure all the policies get into that cycling system. That piece, I don't have a creative idea, other than, I don't know, do you just chunk them off each month? I don't know.
Right. I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure what the best way to approach it is, but does everybody, do people agree that just having eyes, like having every policy come before the policy committee within a 5-year cycle? I mean, I'm throwing 5 years out there because I'm seeing a lot from 2013. And then of course, from 2016, 17, 18, where there are many, the rest of them are pretty much in that category. But like half of our policy manual was 8 years ago. And it, do you all feel that it's important to have eyes, and just to, even if it's a notation to say last review, a date last reviewed, or not?
Sarah, from a procedural standpoint, I don't know if they could be amended without it going, even the notation at the bottom. I'm trying to think about our existing policies. If a notation could even be put on it without it going before first read or second read or review, do you know?
So as far as, I'm going to share my screen here so that you guys can take a look at the way the policy looks on the way the policy looks on our computer or on our system. Let's see here. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into one of these sections, here is all of the policies associated with the bylaws. What Marion's suggesting is putting eyes on each one.
Well, each one from 2013,
Okay, so we'll have to decide.
to establish that cycle of review starting from the furthest back is what I'm talking about.
So this particular one is a July 1st, 2013. And
There are 24
there's,
policies. Mhm.
right, there's sections here that says when it was last adopted. There is nothing in here that that differentiates between review and let me just take a look here.
So here's what I'm thinking. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I'm just wondering if we should be doing it in a systematic way to be asking Erie One, because we pay for that service, to say, can you go back to 2013? And they put their eyes on it and say, these are the things that are outdated. Because once we start to talk about it in policy, I think we're all going to have these ideas, but ultimately we want the experts from Erie One telling us, hey, start looking at some of these outdated ones.
Mhm.
I would imagine some things, I would imagine that service will say, you need to start consolidating this and this and this and this. But I'm wondering I don't want to go down that road if they're the experts.
That's a very good point. And
so
then
I can tell you what Erie One is going to be telling us, that if they're going to be putting eyes on each and every one of our policies, that's an audit.
it's a service that we'd have to pay for, right?
Yes. Yes, and what they'll do is the same thing that they did that took us all this route was they'll provide a spreadsheet and they'll go through and say, yes, there's been changes or or recommendations from here, and we'll have to go through each and every single one of them again. So, is it better for us to just develop our own way of looking at each one, or do we want to ask Erie One to do it?
A lot of boards that I know of, they usually have an attorney or two that sits on the board, so they're, they're kind of the experts in that area. Experts to a point. I don't know. If we have policies that we haven't looked at since 2013, I do think we should look at them. They're probably outdated, but maybe we could ask them to look at, I don't know how much it would be. I mean, we're not doing a whole, maybe we ask for like that year. So if we can get through the 2013, then the year after we do like and that way we're keeping up to date. The next year we do 2014 or 2015 and not a full policy review.
Right. Well, we can inquire. I mean, we can ask what a partial, we can gather some information about that from Erie One. Because, yeah, and that's a conversation to have anyway, because I think we operate on the assumption that if an update comes in from, New York State recommendations, education law, that they'll update those policies, whether they're from 2000, last looked at in 2013 or not. The question is, I just have a feeling that there are things in there that are going to be blatantly maybe outdated that wouldn't necessarily come to Erie One's attention because it's not related to law, or just cleaning up items. I'm not sure because I haven't. It's hard to read through all the policies, but just on a quick looking through, I found a couple policies that didn't have any date on them. So I think there's probably just some like housekeeping things even that just haven't been able to be attended to because of the other project.
And if it's,
Go ahead.
if it's a policy that's not mandated and it's very customized to our district, would it ever be triggered in Erie One to come before us for an update?
I think only if there was an audit, correct, Sarah?
So most of Erie One's BOCES match ours as far as their numbers go. Their Erie One puts forth everything that's recommended. So chances are, if we have it in ours, they have it in theirs. There's been a few that, particularly through this audit, that where they've said this is not a required policy and there's no need for you guys to have it, but we chose to keep it in. The committee chose to keep the policy in, and I don't recall which one that was off the top of my head, but
certified personnel.
Yes. So they recommended they said there's no need for this. Why do you have it, basically? And that could be one particular one that they wouldn't have. But all of their policies that they have, we're either going to have it or there's some reason why we don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So some of the policies, so Marianne, you said 45 policies are mandated. So the rest of them aren't necessarily mandated, but they're recommended. Is that what you're saying for the most part, Sarah?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Well,
so I'm curious if there's 100 policies out of all of our policies that still say 2013, why were those not triggered in this whole last thing that we just finished with Erie One BOCES? Why were those 100 not chosen by them to have something done if we were just doing a big audit of our whole policy manual?
Because they had no changes.
Okay, so they did look at them. They don't, so if they looked at them and said, we don't have any changes from our standpoint, then in terms of, the point that Lynn brought up, which was a good one, so they did look at it. They don't personally have any recommendations, but that would give us at least some sense of security, knowing, okay, they looked at it. There's no, mandates or laws or anything that require these things to be changed. But from looking at it from a Lake George district, our sense of what we want, or what's needed, what changes maybe have happened since 2013. Can y'all still hear me? My screen went.
Yeah, we can. So this is, I don't know if you can see it, Katie, but this is a spreadsheet that prompted the whole review. This is all of the ones that we have reviewed since we had this audit.
Okay.
So there's significant ones. And green is all ones that someone at some point, this committee at some point in time has put their eyes on. So as you can see, scrolling down, we have
Many.
yeah, many. There's
Sarah, is there potentially some of these policies that say 2013 that did have eyeballs on them, but it just wasn't documented on that policy? Could you tell from that spreadsheet you're showing us?
so
That's the case.
like this one particular 6563, there was no change needed. It says it right on the spreadsheet. And just because it wouldn't be noted on our policy manual because there were no changes on it.
Policy committee look at it, or was it not even looked at because Erie one said no changes needed?
I'm assuming that it wasn't even looked at because there was no changes needed. Ours was exactly what they have.
So I think, that's a great leaping point there, is anything that's on that spreadsheet where they looked at it and said no changes needed, but the policy committee hasn't looked at it. That would be a place to start with all those, because we can be confident that they looked at it and said, there's no legal changes, no mandates changed around this, and we can look at them from a Lake George standpoint and say, we agree, nothing needs to be changed, or something has shifted.
Right. And I think I agree with you, Katie. And I will say that one example of the certified personnel policy, when I looked at that, part of what we want to focus on if we get into a cycle here is looking at the language of notation. Where did I write this here? Whether something was when something was adopted initially, whether it was reviewed, no changes, or reviewed, revised, and adopted again. Like the certified personnel policy, it says 2013 on it. And last fall, we opted to hang on to it. We reviewed it, but the reviewed part isn't part of the language that's on the policy. And so I'm suspecting that as we go through these, that we might be able to be more intentional with our notation on the policy, so that it's very clear when people have taken a look at each policy. That's just one thought that I had. But it sounds like we need to, I want to get some more information. I like, Lynn, your suggestion about, let's just see what everyone has to say about partial audits. And I'll ask a few other questions as well. But if we agree that we want somebody to take a look at policies that haven't been looked at by the policy committee since 2013, would we be interested in proceeding the way we have in the past with, looking at policies electronically, or do we want to save the whole thing for our policy meeting and have, and look at a certain chunk of them together for discussion then? I mean, it doesn't matter to me. It seems like the electronic avenue has worked well, and gives us the leisure of just reading and thinking before we go to our meetings. But how do you guys feel about that either way? And then we can revisit this afterwards. I can follow up after I speak with Erie One.
I think electronic review makes sense because that would be bringing all those to the meeting and doing it there, I think would be really time consuming as opposed to only bringing to the meeting the ones that people have questions, concerns that can't be resolved through electronic review.
Mike and I agree.
I agree. This has been very efficient and the electronic review is out well.
Same here.
Okay.
This was our most effective work, I think, on this committee.
Okay. All right, great. Well, let me try to gather some more information and get it out to everybody, and we'll go from there. We don't have to have everything decided today, but it's just an important conversation. And is there any other aspect of policy task that's on anybody's mind that that we also might want to consider moving forward? I mean, this is, in my mind, just getting into the structure of review moving forward so that we stay caught up and in touch with what's in that manual is a focus of mine. But is there anything else?
I would say that when we do get together in person, we used to have a big celebration and carrot cake for things, and I think we need the carrot cake celebration because this has been an awesome task. And maybe Marianne, you invite the other folks who have chaired this committee because this has been such a multi-year process, and
Mhm.
you know, we all did it. It's just it's huge.
It's a great idea. Mhm.
Everybody loves the carrot cake.
As long as there's no raisins in it. All right. Thanks. guys.
I don't think Jeff puts raisins in his.
Okay, so let's move on to the next topic on our agenda here. Oh, I wanted to just ask, I had put on the policy, students with life-threatening health conditions that's supposed to go into effect on July 1st. And I didn't know, Fran, if you had a sense from care, you know, there was supposed to be some time for some training and Narcan acquisition. Is there any information about that, or is that, do we think we're going to be able
The
to move?
Narcan acquisition, I think, is Carrie's has a couple avenues that she's pursuing that. One locally with our own ambulance corps and fire department. But in terms of the training, everything kind of
Yeah,
everything kind of
nobody's. So I guess, so that's what I figured, but I'm just wondering, do we need to, I mean, I guess it doesn't, nobody's in school. Does it matter if this, I just want to make sure that we don't like put it in July if there's any reason that we shouldn't.
I can connect with her, and if there's, I'll connect back with you, Marianne and Lynn, what Carrie says. I'm thinking it's going to be fine with a July 1, you know, keeping it as July 1, but let me confirm that with Carrie.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then the next policy was the non-resident students policy. And Lynn, I had reached out to you about that piece that I think was being discussed in the Audit and Finance Committee meeting about Chris Lanchanton was going, do you know what I'm talking about? She was going to take a look at that. The one wording part about not, not admitting a student that where the cost would increase and whether or not that could be perceived as discriminatory, and if we need to take a look at that language at all.
Sarah, did you send that? I thought that we got that back.
So, yes, Chris did respond. That is the one where if we had to hire new staff, the wording was if we had to hire new staff because we were taking on more tuition students. And it's determined like one of those students might need a TA and we don't have a TA, a one-to-one TA, and we don't have a TA. Would we be required to hire new staff. And because what Chris had said was that we can't determine whether or not someone's going to sue us or not, but our policy is written so that we could prevent someone from attending our school. And it's got nothing to do with with a student with disabilities or anything. It's got to do with our policy states that if we have to hire new employees for a class or student or whatever, then it's not discriminatory the way it's written. But a person could determine, in their mind, they could say, well, I still think you're discriminating against, so I'm going to sue you. It's all an interpretation, but the way the policy is written is we don't have to hire new staff to fill rosters or provide services.
She was comfortable with the language in the policy
Yes.
as is.
Yes.
Okay.
She said you can't tell anyone that they can't bring a lawsuit against us. However, that the language as it's written is not, in her legal opinion, is fine. I have not brought my recommendation to Audit and Finance, but because this is the policy committee, I will share with the policy committee that after we had our Audit and Finance discussion, and that we've talked about this quite a few times, at this point in the history of Lake George Central School District and where we are with COVID, I'm not going to be recommending an adjustment right now in the non-resident tuition. I am still supporting the change we made with staff, but I think next year we're going to have quite a few challenges. And I just think this is not the time right now to be reducing that non-resident tuition. So if you guys want to comment, questions, or that would be my recommendation to the Audit and Finance Committee.
Well, that makes sense to me. And the other is the wording issue, the policy itself. I mean, you're not talking, I mean, we still have a policy for taking non-resident students at the state tuition level, right? So I guess so as long as that is still intact. Yeah, my questions were really around the language of the policy itself. But certainly your fiscal concerns about, adjusting the tuition at this point make solid sense to me.
Right. And when we first started this discussion a couple of years ago, some of it was if we opened up or moved the tuition down, that maybe it would really help our enrollment. But with the CASDA review, it was pretty clear that if we chose to do that route, they didn't believe that was going to really impact our enrollment one way or the other. And I think with, like I said, what we were going to be up against in September, I'm just not sure right now is the time to adjust that tuition.
Any other comments or thoughts about that? Thanks, Lynn. Okay, and then last item on the agenda today was Lynn had raised the issue. I forget what Google forum we were in when we talked about this, but the idea of possibly adjusting our meeting time. I mean, I know it's different at this point, meeting virtually, but in general, provided we're back in school and our meeting time historically being attached to the hour before the PTSO meetings, we run over sometimes, and I don't want to create a stressful situation for people who need to be somewhere else right at 6 o'clock. And I had wondered way back if, it made sense to create a little bit of space in there and wiggle room, but I'm also want to be sensitive to people's needs around mealtime and taking a break and how much time, what you have scheduled after the regular school day. But there was a suggestion that we possibly change, change the meeting time to say, 4:30 or 4:45 so that there's a little bit of wiggle room at the end and people have opportunity to take a. But obviously that impacts you all more than it does me. I'm completely flexible, but what does anyone have a preference?
In concept, I fully agree if it works with the schedules of Lynn and the principals and Mike and the other committee members. I have felt like, like our time is so tight, and we have actually run over. Definitely 15 more minutes would be, I think, that question a great idea, and half an hour, if it worked for people, would be better.
Not that we would schedule it for an hour and 15 minutes, but that it just would be, it would decompress the end of that meeting and give people a little bit of breathing space. So how do you guys, do you like it the way it is? Do you want to give yourself a 15 or 30-minute cushion?
I think building in more time is better. It's been rushed. I agree with you. Backing up against that 6 o'clock PTSO meeting has been tough.
We can try to add 15 minutes and see how that goes. Obviously, with the number of items we may or may not be needing to discuss this year, we may have the time. So maybe we start with 15 minutes. Keeping it at that the same nights would be helpful.
Okay.
Well, Jim, you bring up a good point. If we started it at 4:45, just made that 15-minute adjustment, and if there was a particular meeting where we saw there was a lot of things we needed to cover, we could do a special, if it worked for people, a special, even longer adjustment for that particular night, but in general, started at 4:45, the evenings of the PTSO meetings.
I think that would work.
Lynn and Mike? You there?
You're on mute.
And I like the idea of starting earlier at 4:45.
Okay. And Lynn, I think you're the one who brought it up, so I think you agree with that too, right?
Yeah, I've just noticed that we have a lot to get done in an hour. We can run short. So I think we should consider that, especially for our curriculum meetings where we usually have 2 presenters. They usually run over. So I support it.
Okay. We're done early. We're too bad we don't have a PTSO meeting. All right. Anything else anyone wants to comment on, or questions or thoughts? Because otherwise we are.
Nice job.
All right. Well, thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Okay. I'll
Thanks,
get back
everybody.
to you. We'll talk to Erie One and we'll firm up a plan. But we got a little bit of a start with that. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Take
Right.
care.